Hello and welcome to the virtual seminar on Net Promoter Systems, or NPS, with Torey Maerz, co-founder of Rocket Referrals. This session was previously recorded during a small group presentation and has been provided by Torey and the team to the Greater Domain Partnership, and we want to just say that we are very thankful to them for providing this. If after seeing this you have any wish to connect, you can contact Mike Caldwell at mcaldwell@dsmpartnership.com. Thank you.
Okay, hopefully once I start the show, can you guys still see the presentation? I'm not like a Zoom person, so I don't know. Maybe a thumbs up if you can see it. All right, cool.
Yep.
All right, the Net Promoter System. A lot of you may have heard the acronym NPS. Wonder what does it mean? Well, it actually means a couple of different things. Started out as meaning Net Promoter Score, but over time, people realized it really should be a Net Promoter System. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both. What is the Net Promoter Score and the Net Promoter System? This is definitely meant to be a quick overview. However, if you have questions, just unmute your mic or, throw them out there. I think that we have just a few people, so I think we'll be okay doing that. Okay, so you guys all know me. All right, so really what the heck is it? The Net Promoter System starts out with this question: how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague? And then you get presented with a 0 through 10 score. A lot of us have seen this in the past, probably, with pretty much everybody's using it. But let's break it down real quick. If we think about it in different groups, we have 3 groups. You have your red group over to the left, and then the middle, you got 7s and 8s, and your 9s and 10s. The thought here is that if you're rating us 6 or below, you're what we call a detractor. If you're in the middle, you're neutral. You're neither a detractor or a promoter. And if you rate us a 9 or a 10, you're a promoter. Some people actually think that it's a 10-point scale, but it's actually 11 because you have the 0 in there, which is important because you want to know the zeros. And so how do we calculate it? NPS is calculated really as the percentage of promoters minus your percentage of detractors, and that gets you your NPS. That means that the score can range from -100 to a +100. If you only have detractors, then you would have a score of -100. If you only have promoters, you would have a score of 100. Here's another way that you can calculate it, which if you want to do it in one sort of calculation, it's really the number of promoters minus the number of detractors divided by the number of responses that you got times 100, and that's going to get you your NPS. So that's a really quick, easy way of calculating it. And so some examples for calculation: if we send it to 100 people and we have 40 detractors and 50 promoters, 50 minus 40 is 10 divided by 90 times 100. That gets you an NPS of 11. Really, it would be 11.11, but typically in NPS, you just chop off the decimal. Sometimes people round up. But how about neutrals? I thought that this was an interesting one because, as you noticed, you didn't see neutrals in the calculation for NPS, but it does impact the score. So if you have 50 promoters and 50 neutrals, you have 50 minus 0 because you had no detractors, divided by 100 times 100 is 50. You can see how neutrals will impact the score, but not as impactful as detractors. How about if I don't have any promoters, what happens? And this is kind of how you can see how your score goes down to -83. You have 50 detractors, 10 neutral, then your score becomes a -83. So that's really how you calculate it and what it is. But I want to talk more about what I think is the best part about NPS. And that's the question that follows NPS. If you've taken an NPS survey, you probably then saw a question after it that said something similar to, why did you rate us the way that you did? Honestly, every time I see the question posed that way, it frustrates me because I don't feel like they took the time to implement the system the right way. Instead, now if you want to have a premium system, what they do is they alter the question that follows the score based upon how they scored. So if someone responds 0 through 6, they're saying, what can we do to improve? We love specifics. And the most important part about the NPS is this follow-up question. You want to get the specifics for why people rated you the way that they did, especially because of how we can analyze this data in the future. Now, if you answered a 7 or 8, we should say, how could we change to get your score to a 10? We want to get these 7 and 8s moving in the right direction. So we want to know, what can we do to actually get the score up? And then your 9s and 10s, we, have a question, or our response is like, wow, thank you. What did we do to deserve such a great score? We love specifics. And what you're trying to do here is get that person to recall a story or a specific reason that they scored you that high. And there's a couple of things that are happening to people when they do that. They're writing down the thing that they're most happy with, and that sort of cements that story into their into their head. And this is the story that they're going to tell their friends and family when they refer you and or promote you, or they leave a review. And that's why we add that little piece on the end that says we love specifics. We want them to think about specifically that thing is that you did. And also that's the thing that you can use later, that I'm going to talk about how you can actually take this to the next step. So when do we send NPS? Well, there's a couple of different ways that people do NPS. There's a transactional NPS and a relational NPS. So your transactional NPS is about sending a survey like, the how likely are you to recommend after an interaction. So if you buy a bike at a bike shop, maybe they would send it after the purchase is complete. Or if you're a bike shop, maybe you're going to send out a survey after repair has been done, or something like that. So I have mixed feelings about transactional NPS. At the end of the day, you want to do what's right for your business. If you have a transactional business, then transactional NPS is good for you. If you have a relationship business, then relational NPS is more your speed. Oh, nice. So relational NPS is more gauging the long-term relationship, and we think that it should be done at least twice per year. The interesting thing about relational NPS, when you ask the questions that I just went through, the follow-up questions appropriately, you actually can draw out some transactional things as well. And I'm going to talk about how you can do that. So we see relational NPS as a more valuable piece, and where you should start if you're going to be doing NPS. Granted, if your business is very transactional, it's buy and then maybe I'm not going to come back after a while or something like that, you're probably looking at something that's closer to transactional. I made my slides not thinking I had transitions, and then I did. So, how do we send it? Well, it really works best when a person is asking directly. I think that you've all received these Net Promoter systems that are just a pop-up in an app, or at the bottom of a receipt, or in an email that comes from a generic company, mailing address or something. And those fall flat on their face pretty much 9 times out of 10. What you want to do is send it from a person. So let's use the bike shop as an example. If you're a bike shop, send it from the owner, or send it to someone who would genuinely be interested in the person's feedback. It makes a big difference, not just in the response rates that you're going to get, but also the type of feedback that you'll have. You want to know how your people, did, and what their experience was that moved them to be a promoter or a detractor. So it's really important, and that's why I put meh on the within your app. There's some NPS tools that will pop open the NPS bar at the bottom, and they'll say, how likely are you to recommend? I feel like those things are one of the tools that have really sort of cheapened the experience and the thought behind NPS. And I don't feel like you're really getting true accurate data. It's more, you're going to get impersonal responses when you ask it in an impersonal way. So why does NPS really work? Well, it's quick to do, and it has a high response rate. It's really easy for us to send out surveys these days through email, phone, text message, whatever it is. And because it's only one question and then a follow-up, you get a really high response rate. Also, for that reason, it's your ability to find and fix individual problems quickly is good. So that means if people are likely to respond to it, I'm more likely to find problems that someone has and then put someone on them to get them fixed. I'm going to talk about closing the loop here in a second. Secondly, it's a loyalty measure, not a satisfaction measure. So people may be satisfied. So when you're asking satisfaction surveys, people, you may see that people are satisfied, but they still might leave. They might leave your company, and they may not be likely to recommend you. And yet people who are loyal are willing to tell others. So what we're trying to do here is identify people that are willing to talk about you and use you as, we're trying to find people who are your promoters, who are actually going to, leave reviews and testimonials and share your name with the friends, and who are, social influencers and that kind of thing. That's who we want to find. And again, it's about finding, and then also I'd say creating loyal customers. So if you go from NPS score to NPS system and you use a feedback loop that I'm going to talk about here, then you really use this to create loyal customers. You can find detractors or people who are unhappy, fix those problems in a snap, and then actually turn those people into promoters. And the third thing is people talk about their most important issues. When you have a satisfaction survey and it's many pages long and you're ranking 0 to 10, or how satisfied are you with this from a score from 0 to 10 on 20 different things, it's really hard to distinguish between or what their highest priority thing is, from a 10 on the first question to a 10 on the second, third, or whatever it is. And also the AI and NLP, or natural language processing, I would say, is really good at pulling topics and themes and things like that out of the comments that people leave. So that question that we're asking at the end that says, what could we do right? Or what could we do to get your score from a 9 or a 10? Or what could we do better? We can use computers to figure out what are people most happy with or most upset with. And they even do sentiment and everything. We can pull out specific people. I'll kind of show you our dashboard and what we, use here, but you can quickly find what customer service reps you have that are drawing your score down more than any other people, or what products maybe does a customer have that are pulling the score down, and that type of thing. So sometimes you don't necessarily need to ask someone whether they're happy with something or not, because they're just going to tell you if they are. And we have tools now that can process tons and tons and tons of text to pull out these things. So we don't necessarily need to ask the questions. So what can we use NPS for? Well, benchmarks is really, when people think about the score, this is where their mind, goes. They can say, how do I compare in the industry or to competitor? Is my score good or bad compared to other people? I've had customers ask me, hey, Torey, can we take our NPS score and put it on our website and tell customers we're proud of it? And I'm like, no, this is not for customers. The customers do not care what your NPS score. They don't have the benchmark data. This is for you to improve your customer experience. But you can also use it internally. Compare one region of your company against another, or maybe one department to another, or a team, and even down to the individual levels. So what might that look like? This is our rank. We're ranked number 689 of all of the companies that we have. I know it looks like we moved down in a day. Tell you, this COVID-19 thing has not been good for anyone. But guess what? My individual rank is number 1, and no, I did not change that just because I own the system. I think that I've only sent out a few surveys, so that's probably why. But you can look at what our company score is, and we allow people to click and view like the whole rank. whatever system you use, it doesn't matter whether it's, us or anyone. There's so many, and I'm going to give you a link to show you all kinds of different NPS tools that you can choose from. Having the benchmark data is really important because it helps you see just where you stand. You might think that an NPS of 77 kind of is crappy, but actually is pretty good. Or you might not know that a score of 50 is terrible, so it's really important to have. And then down below, you can actually see how I rank our team members over time, so we can see how people are improving. Let me see if I can move the Zoom thing, kind of got in the way. So actually, you can kind of see Lauren, for example, she's in the light green. She's kind of moved down a little bit, and Scott has moved up. And they're kind of battling for that place. And it's interesting because the team now will use this as a competition. Essentially, they all want to be number one, in the team. And this type of benchmark is really good internally to help build morale and rally around customer experience, because as a company, we say how important customer experience is and how important it is that you keep your NPS score up. And they love to brag when they go over, when they beat someone out on a score. So it's a really, really good thing for the team. The other thing we can do is closing the loop. So the idea of closing the loop is if someone gives a survey response and then your team gets it, and then your response back to them is a loop. So that's why we call it closing the loop. And also you can activate promoters. So what does that look like? Well, imagine, and this is what we call operationalizing the NPS. When you start to close the loop and listen to the feedback, this is when you move from a net promoter score to a net promoter system. So let's imagine a detractor gives us a response. That feedback needs to go into your support team. They need to be notified very quickly that a customer had an issue, and then the support team calls them quickly and fixes the issue. So you can kind of see how it makes the loop. A lot of survey tools out there will say, hey, we're going to survey all of your customers all in one batch. And that would be the biggest mistake you could ever make, unless you have enough people to respond to all of those responses that you're going to get within 24 hours, because you can make a huge impact to a detractor and turn them into a promoter if you fix that issue almost immediately. They'll actually be very surprised that you actually called them. So the idea is to do the surveys in a way, and this is another reason that I love relationship-based NPS, is because you can actually time the surveys out over the course of a year and spread them out so that you're seeing not only how is your team changing over time, but also to make sure you have enough staff in place to respond and actually close the loop. So how about promoters? Well, it's not like we just want to respond to detractors. We should also be doing things with promoters. The idea is you want to get your promoters to promote, and you want to get your neutrals to turn into promoters. So your support team should still be calling up promoters, thanking them, for taking the time to respond to the survey, asking them if they need any help with anything, maybe sharing other resources that they could take advantage of, or doing the reviews on their account. Not necessarily directly asking for reviews, testimonials, or referrals, because those things are going to come naturally, especially when you have people in an automated communication tool that can, drive those things. But whether it's your support team reaching out to those promoters or an automated system that's communicating with those promoters, you need to take that information, put it into your system, and tag that person in your CRM as a promoter or detractor, and then use that to drive communications in your funnel or in your customer engagement tools, or whatever it could be. We like to have a flag on the CRM for every customer, so that when you're talking with them on the phone, or when they get emails in, you know right away what their latest NPS score was. Was it a 0, or was it a 10, or somewhere in between? Whoops. Okay. All right. So the last thing on what we can use it for is, now this is something that at Rocket Referrals, we've really added on. A lot of people kind of end it there. They say, okay, now that you're closing the loop, this is a net promoter system. But I go back and I think about all of these detractors that are still out there. Like, yes, I'm fixing individual issues again and again and again, but how can we fix the root of the problem and make sure that I don't have detractors going forward? We've seen that fixing the loop, fixing root problems can help improve retention by as much as 5%. Over a couple of years, we've monitored people using the NPS, and we've seen the retention improve by 5% or more over the 2 years time, which is huge and means big dollars to the company. Obviously, reviews, testimonials, word of mouth that I spoke about. So what does fixing the loop really look like? Well, imagine grouping all of those detractors and their comments into a bucket, and you have all of this data now. You have all these comments. You say, okay, here's what people are saying about us. Now you can start to analyze that data, and there's lots of tools that you can use to pull out the themes and topics and comments and people out of those comments and start to understand, why do we have detractors? What are the core problems, and where can we focus our time? And then, focus your team on fixing those issues. If you find, for example, that communication is an issue, or proactive communication is an issue, you can implement, things that are sending customers more proactive communication, or identifying issues before they happen, and then fixing them without the person ever knowing. And then how about, what does fix the loop from a promoter's perspective look like? Well, if we take all of our promoter things and start to analyze them, we really start to understand what our core values are. So from a marketing perspective, this is really valuable, because we start to understand why people really love us, and what are the things that our promoters really see as the value piece that we can even sell more to our prospects. And then we can take these promoters and pull out these things and build case studies and all kinds of other material that we can use for sales. Think of this like, if you've seen Google reviews, over on the right hand corner, they'll actually summarize the core things about a company. They are great at service because they saw that in 80% of the comments, and or whatever. We're trying to come up with what the core values are. So this is what it kind of looks like for us. We have a dashboard that, there's lots of different ways you can do this, but we pull out things like people mentioned. I have the next slide kind of zooms in. Oops, I thought I had, yeah, there it is. So we pull out people that are mentioned, common themes across the comments, and then also topics that come out. So what are people actually talking about? Clients or service, reviews, etc. Reviews, for example, this is something that a lot of people with Rocket Referrals will either love or hate. It's a small piece of what we do, but we help collect more online reviews for people. And either they love that we do it over time and not all at once, or they hate it. If I were to zoom in and look at this little group of red, it's people say, hey, I'm not getting enough reviews fast enough. And then we go look at the reviews and we find out that, they're getting the perfect amount to increase their SEO and to really, have a better presence on local search, but they want more. And so for us, that told us we need to have an expectation setting process for people when they buy Rocket Referrals, to talk about how the review process works and that kind of thing. So anyway, that's an interesting thing we can do. So, and this is kind of the last piece here. I'm trying to zoom through this because I know we have some other stuff to talk about, but some things to think about with NPS. It really shines when it's used along with other measures. Although it's different than customer satisfaction, it's certainly not made to replace those things. So the idea here is to use NPS, especially when you can operationalize it, use it for that feedback loop and that kind of thing, but add customer satisfaction to it. Not necessarily like right after another, but you may want to carve off a piece of your customers that you want to get satisfaction surveys along with it. So there's still really good reasons to use customer satisfaction surveys. I'm not the expert on customer satisfaction surveys, but I have seen businesses use NPS along with those that it works. So really what then you want to do too is correlate what people say they'll do with what they do. So people will say they actually recommend, but you want to tie in the people who are recommending with the people that say they're recommending and start to find some differences or some commonalities between those things. Okay, one more, two more. Important to customize. I kind of talked a little bit about this before. If your business is more transactional, it's a bike shop or something like that, obviously you want to have something that matches your business. And the question itself can change. Instead of saying friend or colleague, maybe it's friend or family or business partner or something like that. It's important to be thoughtful about what words you use and when, again, to bring that real personalization and specifics to the person. And it's not operational by default. So from the beginning, it was just a net promoter score. It does take some work to turn it from a score into a system, but when you do, that's when you get the best benefits. If you start with just a score, you're going to get some benchmark data. You're going to start to understand kind of where you stand, and maybe you'll be able to glean some things out of the comments. But really, until you turn it into a system, you're not going to get the most. And it does take some work to turn it into a system. You have to make sure that your staff are following up with people. You have to make sure that there's a task on their task list. When you have a detractor that comes in from a promoter standpoint, you have to make sure that there's communications that are set to go out to your promoters that actually get them to promote. So it can drive a lot of things. I think that the net promoter score, as lots of people just think it's great, but it's not until you turn it into a system and really put the communications and process in place at the end that it turns into something really powerful. And then this is a link, actually, I'll after I end the presentation, I'll copy this and I'll put it in chat so you guys have it. These are the list of software companies that have worked with Bain & Company to license the NPS, and then links to their websites and that kind of stuff. You'll find us on there. Obviously, Rocket Referrals is really made for insurance agents and that type of thing. So I'm not sure that we're right for everyone, but there are a couple of really good systems on there I would recommend. There's Ask Nicely, there's Promoter.io, there's Delighted, and there's probably even a few others on newer on there that I haven't looked at. So this is the best link to find people that can do it. And asking time. Anybody have questions? I know I zoomed through it. I was trying to be thoughtful of our time.
Torey, this is Mike. Can you share the deck with everybody today?
Yeah, you bet. I will.
If you want to send it, you can just throw it in Zoom, or you can send it to me, or throw it in Slack. You can send it to me. I don't care. Then I have one other question. You mentioned AI and natural language processing tools.
Yeah.
Can you tell us any that you're using?
Yeah, well, we built our own because it's really a core competency that we want to have.
Sure.
And so it's tough for me to recommend exactly where it was. If Brad's on the line, he might also, have some recommendations for where to go. But we use a combination of different services and our own piece. Like there was a time where we had our employees classify all kinds of comments. Like there's like hundreds of thousands of NPS responses that our employees were looking at and classifying them. And we had a competition to, around that. It was a fun process, but we had to go through that to help classify our customers' stuff. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Is Brad on here? I thought I saw him maybe join.
He's listed on here. I'm not sure if he checked out.
I'm here. Joseph actually might be a bit better expert on that. I think he's on here too.
My last company was an NLP company. We built custom tools using open source libraries that I can drop in the chat. In terms of off the shelf tools that are pretty good for this, things like Zendesk isn't super bad. Sentiment classifiers from Google Cloud Platform isn't so bad. But the truth is that to get the best results, things need to be custom and tailored probably to the needs and things that you most care about. So it doesn't surprise me that you mentioned that Rocket Referrals, you had your employees hand tag and classify things that mattered most. The truth is, you can probably get pretty far from using a mix of open source tools that like just require custom tagged data. So building your own system doesn't mean creating your own algorithms for NLP. It probably just means getting your data to retrofit for open source libraries. And I can drop some of those in the chat here.
Cool.
Hey, Torey, this is Michael Kramer.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of the things I was going to ask, we had my prior company, we did a lot more of the NPS system, and I that's the right way to approach it. It's not just capturing the score. We did a lot with what people gave to us, and that really made us a lot better. Like all the things that you said, I couldn't agree more with. My question to you is, did you ever find that it mattered who called them, especially maybe the detractors? Did you try to find a person at a certain level or with a certain title? Did that seem to have a better impression, or was it indifferent?
Yeah, that's a great question. So speaking from when I talk with my customers that are having success with it, the idea is have someone call that can solve the problem. So they know what the problem is. So sometimes it might just be an emotional thing that someone has, like they want to be heard. And that might mean that you need to have, someone higher up give the call, because you want to know that their voice was heard at the highest level, possible. But then if it's sort of a transactional thing and just a problem that needs to be fixed, then have someone who can actually fix that, give a shout out. So, we have all of our customers. Well, we recommend that our customers are sending NPS from their client service representatives. So those people, if it's one of those emotional things, they'll tell their leader, which their leader will get all of the notifications. And then if the leader does call, they'll say, hey, Jane, your CSR, told me about this. And, I just wanted to hear your problem out, or something like that. And that shows not just that you're being heard, but your team is internally talking and communicating. Hopefully you don't get a lot of those, and your, CEO isn't making a ton of calls. To be honest, from my perspective, I've probably made like 2 or 3 of those over all of the surveys we've sent out. And I think that I have some customers who want to make those calls, like they're the agency owner and they're doing 3 or 4 of those calls, every day, because that's what they see their job as. And then there's the CEOs that don't want to talk with their customers. I can tell you, if I look at their businesses, which one is doing better. It's obviously the one that really cares about customers. So.
Hey, Torey, Kaylee here from Volunteer Local. I can chime in on that, Brett. So I've made a couple of calls to people that left us a pretty negative, emotionally charged review, and I've never regretted it. Every single time that we've made that call, it's been a really productive conversation. And even if they're not happy and we could never solve their problem, they're still really grateful that I called. And I think the title, I'm the president, I think the title definitely helps, to your point, where they feel like their feedback made it all the way up to the people who make the decisions at the company.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I hope everybody gives NPS a shot. I think it's one of the greatest tools that you can use. You don't even really quite know the benefit that you're going to get until you give it a shot. So go out to that link, find something that you can use to get started with really quickly. Even if you start from just a Net Promoter Score, and start there to understand the benchmarks and things like that, you're going to be surprised with the feedback that you get, and also how quickly the feedback comes in. And even right now, maybe this is a good transition into the COVID-19 stuff. I don't know, Mike, if you wanted to, if you had anything else to talk about, but we have seen during the COVID-19 issue or crisis that we're going through right now, there's not really been any change. If anything, an increase in responses that we're seeing from customers. And as long as the agency is still capable of responding, it's been a really positive thing for people to stay in touch. And during a crisis like this is when you want to know who your detractors are, who are the people that are likely to leave if you're not communicating with them appropriately. And also from a promoter standpoint, who are the people that can help get your message out and that kind of thing. So now is a really good time to be doing these things. We've had some customers actually ramp up the number of surveys and things that they're doing, which is, it kind of caught us by surprise, but it was interesting nonetheless to kind of see how it's changed. It's been awesome chatting with you guys. Thanks so much for wading through my NPS presentation. Sorry if I zoomed through it. I feel like I talk about it a lot, so I probably rushed. I don't know. Alrighty. Thanks guys. It was nice chatting.
Thanks everybody.
Be safe.